The pioneering Swiss psychologist Carl Gustav Jung was one of the first modern thinkers to trace the spiritual thread which connects the ancient quest for gnosis to our times, finding a parallel with his own efforts to explore the unconscious.
Jung was a deeply religious personality, the most religious person I ever knew. But I think it was his greatness to keep the secret.
Jung died in 1961, aged 85. His adult life was spent practicing psychoanalysis in Küsnacht on Lake Zurich. His reputation is based upon his theories of the unconscious dimension of the psyche and his efforts to share the secrets of the soul, or the unconscious, through dreams. As his secretary and pupil, Agnella Jaffe worked alongside Jung for almost 30 years.
Jung was very much interested in all manifestation of mankind coming directly from the unconscious. Now, Gnosticism, or Gnosis, is not an intellectual wisdom, but a wisdom which was expressed by feeling, by the unconscious. But Gnosticism was something which gave an insight to the unconscious of man, how it functions. This wealth of images, pictures, visions, and so on. Therefore, he was very much interested. And also to see how deeply religious the unconscious is.
Jung began to study Gnostic ideas in about 1910, while he examined the dreams of both private patients and those in mental hospitals. He revived the Gnostic term archetypes to describe the mythical and mystical symbols and images that lie below the surface of everyday conscious life, but erupt from the unconscious in dreams.
Naturally led me on to a profound study of the archetypes. I got more respectful of archetypes. And the next question I asked myself was, now where in the world has anybody been busy with that problem? And I found nobody, except a peculiar spiritual movement that went together with the beginnings of Christianity, namely the Gnostics. And that was the first thing I studied, that I thought they were concerned with the problem of archetypes.
Jung was a Renaissance man of the 20th century, with a genius for exploring and embracing the most varied fields of religion and philosophy. At one time, he painted Tibetan prayer wheels, or mandalas, expressing one powerful human archetype.
It just came to him. That was also such an archetype, you see. And he wrote in his handwriting, this is the first mandala I constructed in the year of 1916, wholly unconscious of what it meant. C.G. Jung. It's a symbol of totality. It is a circle. It has, to my feeling, of course, it has to do with the stars, because the sun makes enormous circles of mandala. If you knew his hands, his big man hands, and his very small little painting, you see, that's something moving.
Jung absorbed the Gnostics' theological myths and symbols and even wrote a short essay in Gnostic style, The 7 Sermons to the Dead. Despite an immense gulf of time, he regarded the Gnostics as his predecessors in the search for spiritual awareness.
They have lived in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century, and what was in between? Nothing. And now, today, we certainly fall into that hole and are confronted by the problems of the collective unconscious, which were then the same in 2,000 years ago, and we are not prepared to meet that problem.
Jung called the Gnostic texts he studied well-nigh inexhaustible sources of knowledge for the psychologist. He connected them with the dreams and visions, the gods and godlessness of his own patients. His colleague, Professor C.A. Meyer, sees the modern search for spiritual knowledge, which is not satisfied by faith alone, becoming more important than ever.
Nowadays, the need for knowledge is ever so much more important than it used to be while we still were believers, because the majority of people nowadays are no longer believers. They cannot be told the old story time and again. They want something, they want to know something and to understand it, and therefore they must be referred to their own experience, which is the unconscious, and that's why we, for instance, ask for people's dreams. What we can observe with our patients is mainly that they suffer from the conditions of this planet. And that is what the Gnostics were concerned with as well.
His thesis was that Gnosticism is not philosophy or speculation or heresy, but that it is simply an experience of the soul. And curiously enough, the Jung Codex, which shows you the experience of the Gnostic, of life as a nightmare in this world, until you hear the voice somewhere coming from somewhere of Gnosis, that is a complete confirmation of his thesis that Gnosis is based on an inner experience.
Codex 1 from Nag Hammadi was named the Jung Codex for the first modern scholar who took Gnostic works seriously.
He is quoted as having said, "I have worked all my life to know the psyche, and these people knew already." And it is true that the Gospel of Truth in the Jung Codex is such a vivid illustration of what man's predicament is according to Jung, that it could have been a falsification by a Jungian, which it is not.
For Jung, religious experience was the center of all human experience. His apparent preference was for the Gnostics' symbolic, individual search for religious truth, rather than the mass appeal of the religious dogma which requires unquestioning acceptance.
He was very in great awe to the dogma. But he said only fools touch to the dogma. But what is necessary is that we understand it now in a new way. Namely, not as 100% truth, but as a symbol. That is a great thing. That changes everything.
What sort of religious upbringing did your father give you?
Oh, we were Swiss.
Jung created consternation at the end of his life when he gave an apparently Gnostic reply to the most obvious question about his religious outlook.
And did you believe in God?
Oh, yes.
Do you now believe in God?
Now? Difficult to answer. I know. I don't need to believe. I know.
I was a secretary at this time. You cannot imagine how many letters I had. They all wanted to know what he knows. What is true is that he never doubted that there is something which people call God. He never doubted. We can believe what you like, but to know that's something different.
That's the famous phrase of his, you know, I don't believe, I know. But already in 1915 he had made a sort of concept of the world which used Gnostic symbols. He was one of the few people in the Western world who was familiar with Gnostic lore and who saw that they were important for our civilization.